25 Christmas traditions from the 1960s that completely disappeared. Christmas in the 1960s was a period of stark contrasts. The discipline of the Christmas Club went hand in hand with the excitement of turning the thick pages of the Sears Wishbook. From lead tinsel to the smell of burning wrapping paper, every tradition contained irreplaceable memories. Today, let's go back and uncover the beautiful Christmas customs that now only exist in memory. Aluminum Christmas trees. For American families from 1959 until the late 1960s, these shimmering silver trees were not merely decorations. They were the peak of modern sophistication, representing the fresh space age era. The Aluminum Specialty Company, based in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, pioneered this trend, producing over 1 million of these magical metal trees. The aluminum trees came in various sizes ranging from 2 to 8 feet, with branch tips resembling silver bottle brushes, creating an industrial and sleek appearance. At the time, they cost between $15 and $25, which is equivalent to about $150 to $250 today. Unfortunately, this shimmering beauty came with a major technical problem. It was impossible to use traditional Christmas lights due to the serious risk of electric shock. To solve this problem, a complex additional device was introduced and became iconic: the color wheel. These were giant spinning discs with colored gel panels, red, blue, green, and amber. This wheel shone directly onto the tree, causing the silver pine to continuously change color in the dark room, creating a dramatic and vibrant light show. By 1965, the craze had peaked, with nearly 40% of American households owning one. However, the fall of the aluminum tree was as fast as its rise. The special program Charlie Brown's Christmas in 1965 straightforwardly criticized their artificiality, emphasizing that they lacked the traditional Christmas spirit. This criticism, along with changing tastes, caused sales to plummet by 1969. Today, vintage aluminum trees are only sought after by collectors who are willing to pay hundreds of dollars on online auction sites. But their dominance in Christmas living rooms has completely vanished. Bubble lights on trees. This magical, gentle, crackling sensation is no longer a common Christmas experience. Imagine standing in front of the Christmas tree, gazing at the glass tubes filled with colored liquid, twinkling on the branches. These enchanting decorations, introduced by Noma Electric in 1946 and peaking in popularity in the 1960s, function like small kettles. The light bulb inside would heat the light liquid, usually a type of oil. After about a 5-minute warm-up period, the liquid would begin to bubble, creating continuous movement and a ceaseless, shimmering magic. Children of that era were mesmerized and drawn to these bubble lights. A 7-light string cost about $2.99 in 1965, equivalent to about $28 today. Bubble lights also presented their own challenges. Each light was made of fragile glass and easily broken. When broken, the mysterious liquid inside would spill out. Although it was considered relatively non-toxic, it still caused anxiety for parents. Furthermore, these strings of lights consumed a significant amount of electricity, increasing the electric bill. By the mid-1970s, concerns about the energy crisis and stricter safety regulations significantly reduced their popularity. The innovation of safer electronic lights replaced them. Although reproduction bubble lights exist today, they lack the unpredictability and authentic beauty of the vintage originals. Lead tinsel. When you look at Christmas photos from the 1960s, you will notice an irreplaceable characteristic: the perfect sparkle of metal strands hanging perfectly straight on the tree. As it turns out, those shimmering strands were not plastic or aluminum, as they are today. They were lead foil. Lead tinsel, invented in Germany in 1610, created an unparalleled brilliance that no modern material can match. The weight of the lead was the key factor, helping the tinsel hang perfectly vertically like silver waterfalls, creating a luxurious and neat appearance. In 1965, a box of 1,000 strands cost only 39 cents, about $3.50 today. Because they were considered precious, families were very careful, spending hours placing each strand of tinsel on the tree and carefully taking them down to reuse the next year. Occasionally, children, in their excitement, would sometimes grab handfuls and throw them onto the tree to quickly create sparkle. This tradition ended abruptly when the FDA banned lead tinsel in 1972 due to the risk of poisoning, especially for children. Manufacturers switched to aluminum and plastic, but these replacement materials known as mylar tinsel were lighter, tangled easily, and created static electricity, never replicating the unique characteristics of lead. Consequently, many families gave up using tinsel entirely. That distinctive heavy sparkle now only exists in black and white photos. Flocking your own tree. Moving into the 1970s, Christmas often came with the attempt to recreate a winter wonderland right in the living room. Do-it-yourself kits for applying artificial snow at home were a Christmas staple. These kits contained spray guns, adhesive, and white cellulose fibers. Since professional flocking services could cost up to $105, DIY was the most economical way. The process was a messy and chaotic family experience. Families had to spread newspapers everywhere, mix the solution, and spend hours spraying faux snow onto the tree. Some people even used a reversed vacuum cleaner to blow the material. This required wearing protective goggles, and the results varied wildly, from a perfect winter spectacle to disasters resembling a sick tree. The bigger problem was health. Flocking powder contained asbestos until 1969, a health risk that no one realized at the time. Cleanup was also a nightmare, with white residue appearing for months afterward. By 1975, pre-flocked artificial trees became popular and easier. Environmental concerns related to aerosols and chemicals also contributed to the end of this messy but memorable tradition. Real candles on Christmas trees. The tradition of lighting real candles on Christmas trees, particularly popular among families of German or Scandinavian descent, was a beautiful but terribly dangerous ritual. Despite the obvious fire risk, many families maintained this custom throughout the 1960s. Small white candles were affixed to the ends of the branches using special clips. To ensure safety, families adhered to extremely strict rituals. Candles were only lit for a few minutes, usually on Christmas Eve, and were never allowed to leave the room. Buckets of water and fire extinguishers were always kept nearby, and family members were assigned strict watch duty. The flickering, warm light of real candles created an unparalleled Christmas atmosphere, a magical glow that electric lights could not replicate. However, the price of this romance was high. The National Fire Protection Association in 1964 reported up to 8,000 Christmas tree fires annually, with candles being the leading cause. Insurance companies fiercely opposed it, and fire departments conducted major campaigns against the practice. By 1972, most cities had completely banned this dangerous tradition. Safer electric lights with significantly improved technology offered a better alternative. This dangerous yet magical tradition faded away forever. New channel, old memories. Help us share more by promoting this video. Every promotion makes a huge difference. Handmade paper chain decorations. Handmade paper was indispensable for Christmas decorations in almost every classroom and home during this period. Indoors, miles of chains strung up were a familiar sight every holiday season. This tradition centered on children's participation. Children were tasked with this activity throughout the winter break, spending hours cutting strips of colored paper, forming them into loops, and then gluing them together. The chains often followed specific color patterns, repeating red, green, and white. In 1967, a packet of colored paper cost only 49 cents. Schools often turned paper chain making into contests where classes competed to see who could create the longest chain. Some families even used magazine pages or old wrapping paper to make chains. The paper chains were hung everywhere, over doorways, windows, fireplaces, and along stair railings. However, they had one major weakness. Humidity or rain could cause a disaster, dissolving the glue and making these long chains fall down. By the mid-1970s, pre-manufactured garlands and decorations became cheap and easily accessible. Modern parents, busier with work, no longer had time for such labor-intensive handcrafting. Door-to-door caroling. Churches, youth groups, and scout troops often organized caroling routes as an annual tradition. During these years of the decade, seeing groups of carolers going from house to house on December evenings was completely normal. Family members also frequently joined together. What made this tradition distinctive was the homeowner's expectation. Families were not surprised. They prepared with cookies and hot chocolate to offer the carolers. The singing groups carried songbooks and flashlights, moving through neighborhoods along organized routes. Some groups also carried UNICEF boxes or other collection bins to raise funds for charity. This activity peaked around 1968, when an estimated 60% of American neighborhoods had the caroling experience. By the mid-1970s, things began to change. Growing concerns about stranger danger, busier family lifestyles, and a reluctance to get involved in legal liability issues started to discourage organization. The development of gated communities and apartment complexes made spontaneous caroling impossible. Department store window displays. In the golden age of downtown centers, large department stores spared no expense in creating intricate and spectacular Christmas displays. Stores like Macy's, Gimbel's, Wanamaker's, and Marshall Field's fiercely competed to have the most breathtaking display. For example, Macy's 1962 display cost $75,000, equivalent to about $750,000 today, and required year-round planning. Far from simple mannequins, they were complex automated wonderlands. They featured mechanical moving figures, miniature train models, and synchronized music. Families regarded visiting these windows as a mandatory Christmas pilgrimage. They lined up for blocks, and parents had to lift children onto their shoulders so they could see clearly. The displays were even changed weekly throughout the season to encourage multiple visits. By the late 1970s, the growth of suburban shopping malls reduced customer traffic in downtown areas. The huge cost of these theatrical presentations was no longer acceptable to large department stores. Most stores had eliminated these complex displays by 1985. The remaining displays today are only pale shadows compared to the grand, theatrical productions that once defined the urban Christmas experience. TV Yule Log Broadcasting. In 1966, New York's WPIX channel created a surprisingly simple television phenomenon. They continuously broadcast the scene of a burning fireplace for 3 hours on Christmas Eve. The original 16mm film, which cost $4,000 to produce, showed the fireplace scene from Gracie Mansion, accompanied by soothing Christmas music. The idea seemed lazy, and TV critics mocked it as the pinnacle of slothful programming. But the truth was that audiences loved it. For those living in apartments without a real fireplace, the Yule log provided a virtual hearth. People gathered around the television, pretending that the electronic fire offered warmth and a festive atmosphere. The Yule log attracted a surprising number of viewers, beating out regular programming. Other cities, such as WGN in Chicago and KTLA in Los Angeles, quickly copied the idea. The original film was damaged from overuse, requiring a remake in 1970. But the real end of this tradition came with the arrival of cable television in the 1980s. The Yule log's monopoly on the screen ended. Although digital versions now exist on online platforms like YouTube, the communal experience of everyone watching the same televised fireplace has been completely extinguished. Sending Christmas cards to everyone. This was it, the undisputed peak period of Christmas card culture. By 1968, Americans sent about 4 billion cards annually. This was a prolonged and meticulous social ritual. Families maintained card lists with hundreds of names, often updating addresses yearly in special notebooks. The process started in November, preparing envelopes, adding personal notes, and affixing stamps. Some families even included detailed family newsletters about the year's activities, typed on carbon paper to make multiple copies. Christmas cards were also an important part of home decoration. The display of cards was highly competitive. People strung ribbons across doorways or arranged them on the mantelpiece. Receiving cards from distant relatives or old friends was often the only form of contact throughout the entire year. Postmen delivered sacks of cards every day throughout December, forcing the post office to hire thousands of temporary staff. The zip code introduced in 1963 helped simplify the processing. Do you still keep any special letters or cards today? Share your favorite memory. Christmas Club savings accounts. The Christmas Club savings account tradition taught an entire generation of Americans about financial discipline throughout the 1960s. Starting in January every year, millions of Americans deposited a small amount of money, usually from $1 to $10, weekly into special savings accounts at local banks. By 1965, over 14 million Americans participated, saving over $2 billion annually. Customers received special payment booklets with 50 weekly coupons. Uniquely, members did not receive interest. Instead, the bank mailed a cash check in early November. This ensured families had cash readily available for Christmas shopping, often before Thanksgiving. Banks competed by offering promotional gifts upon opening an account, such as toasters, blankets, or dinnerware sets. Banks also had special Christmas Club teller windows during the peak season. This weekly deposit ritual taught children about saving and planning. Churches, youth groups, and scout troops often organized caroling routes as an annual tradition. Sears Wishbook arrivals. If you could go back in time and open the 600-page Wishbook, what would you choose? For American children in the 60s, the arrival of the Sears Christmas Wishbook catalog in late summer was a major event, comparable to Christmas morning itself. These enormous catalogs, often up to 600 pages thick and weighing nearly 5 pounds, were mailed to mailboxes in August. Children quickly claimed them, spending months poring over and circling desired toys with different colored crayons. The 1969 version had 225 pages dedicated solely to toys. Wise parents used these books as a behavioral control tool, reminding children that Santa Claus was watching their choices in the Wishbook. Sears spent $100 million annually to produce and mail these books. For rural families, these catalogs were especially important because Sears might be their only shopping option. By Christmas, the books were often crumpled, tattered, and covered in marker circles. Toy commercials during Saturday cartoons. Saturday mornings in December were not just about cartoons. They were hour-long toy infomercials. Toy companies like Mattel purchased huge blocks of advertising, showing the same commercials repeatedly. Children quickly memorized the jingles for Rock'em Sock'em Robots, Easy Bake Ovens, and G.I. Joe. These commercials were complex mini-productions, using elaborate setups to make the toys look magical and appealing. Young children watched specific shows just to see the toy commercials, building their Christmas wish list based on what they saw. The ads often showed children playing in impossible scenarios. Basements turned into battlefields, bedrooms becoming doll castles. With the text batteries not included appearing in the corner of the screen, parents began complaining about this manipulation. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, investigated deceptive practices, finding that ads used camera tricks to enhance the toys' real capabilities. By 1978, advocacy groups successfully imposed commercial restrictions. Christmas corsages for women. Receiving and wearing a Christmas corsage was a common tradition that every woman looked forward to. These were not simple pieces of jewelry. Florists created elaborate bouquets, often including poinsettias, holly sprigs, miniature pine cones, and silver bells, along with ribbons and small bells. Depending on their complexity, they cost between $3 and $8 in 1965. Women wore these corsages to church, office parties, and family dinners. They were a way for women to compare and evaluate their husband's thoughtfulness and generosity. Corsage refrigerators even appeared in supermarkets during December. Wearing a corsage required specific rituals. It had to be worn on the left shoulder, removed when cooking, and stored in the refrigerator. This tradition began to fade in the mid-1970s. The women's liberation movement of the 70s criticized corsages as symbols of female decoration, diminishing their relevance. By 1975, formal Christmas corsages had almost completely disappeared. Fruitcake as actual gifts. It is hard to believe for modern audiences, but during the 1960s and early 1970s, giving and receiving fruitcake was a heartfelt and appreciated Christmas tradition. Fruitcake was not a joke, but a cherished gift. Many families made their own cakes, spending days preparing and soaking dried fruits in brandy or rum for months. A quality fruitcake could require $50 worth of ingredients in 1968, equivalent to about $125 today. Companies like Collins Street Bakery shipped millions of cakes nationwide. Recipients genuinely valued them, serving them to esteemed guests as a special dessert. The best fruitcakes were often made in October to allow enough time for aging. They were also practical gifts because they could last for months without refrigeration. However, this tradition was unexpectedly destroyed by humor. Johnny Carson's frequent jokes on The Tonight Show in the 1970s severely damaged fruitcake's reputation. By 1980, fruitcake had become a comedy prop instead of a sincere gift. Share this video with someone who lived through the 60s. Maybe they will smile remembering those Christmases past. Christmas bonus cash envelopes. At this time, employers handing out envelopes containing cash as a Christmas bonus was a common practice, a tradition that is nearly extinct today. This was not a performance-based bonus, but an expected seasonal gift. The average bonus in 1968 was a week's salary. The bonus was given in new, crisp cash, often taken from banks that had stockpiled extra money for the bonus season. Employers, from small grocery stores to large factories, often personally presented the envelopes to employees on the last workday before Christmas. Sometimes, companies organized a ceremony for handing out the envelopes, where the boss called out each employee's name. This personalized act and the feeling of holding the cash in hand generated genuine gratitude. Employees relied on this bonus for Christmas spending, sometimes spending in advance based on the expected amount. By the late 1970s, stricter IRS tax regulations required documentation and immediate tax withholding. Direct deposit and gift cards replaced the cash envelope, eliminating that moment of suspense and excitement when opening the envelope filled with cash. Mandatory office Christmas parties. If you worked in the late 1960s, attending the company Christmas party was not an option. It was an unwritten requirement that could affect your career. Companies spent lavishly. These parties were often held at luxury hotels or country clubs, starting promptly at 6 p.m. on Fridays in December. The parties featured big bands, open bars, and required formal attire. For example, the General Motors party in 1968 in Detroit cost up to $50,000, about $425,000 today. Absence required an explanation for months afterward. Guests were often spouses, and dancing with the boss's wife was considered politically essential. Gifts were exchanged publicly, with secretaries receiving perfume and executives receiving desk sets. Polaroid cameras captured embarrassing moments that later became office legends. By 1975, social and legal factors ended these extravagant parties. Concerns about workplace equality made mandatory events involving spouses problematic. More importantly, drunk driving lawsuits put an end to unlimited open bars. The economic recession also made lavish budgets unacceptable. Christmas seals on everything. In the golden age of the 1960s, it was rare to receive a Christmas letter or package without a small stamp, featuring Santa Claus or a festive pine tree affixed to the corner of the envelope. These were not regular postage stamps, but Christmas seals, symbols of charitable spirit and compassion during the holiday season. This initiative began in 1907 under the patronage of the American Lung Association, aiming to raise funds for tuberculosis programs. By 1967, the campaign had reached its peak, with over 85 million households across the U.S. receiving sheets of seals via mail, often accompanied by a request for a donation. Each year, the design changed, featuring familiar characters like reindeer, snowmen, or snow scenes, fully embodying the Christmas spirit. Although not mandatory, most families sent back a small amount, typically a few dollars, as a way to show gratitude and a spirit of sharing. In many schools, children were even encouraged to participate in seal-selling competitions, spreading the movement throughout the community. One of the most famous designs was the 1969 version by artist Norman Rockwell, which is collected by many even today. In 1968, the campaign raised up to $35 million, an impressive figure for the time. Moving into the 1980s, as direct mail fundraising flooded in and the email era gradually emerged, these small charity stamps lost their prominence. Nevertheless, in the memories of many Americans, Christmas seals remain symbols of an era full of simple generosity and shared joy. blue laws closing everything. Sundays during the Christmas season of the 1960s were strangely quiet because absolutely nothing was open due to the blue laws. The regulations were established based on religion. This meant that every retail establishment, grocery store, gas station, and department store was completely closed. If you forgot an ingredient for Sunday Christmas dinner, you would have to wait until Monday. Only pharmacies were allowed to open for emergencies, and some even required a police permit. Families had to plan their shopping carefully on Saturday. The enforced quiet of Sunday, without competition from commercial activities, compelled families to spend time together. Churches were packed because there was no other activity to pursue. These laws varied by state, causing confusion. By 1970, commercial pressure began to erode the blue laws. Dual-income families needed Sunday shopping time. Although the Supreme Court upheld the blue laws in a 1961 case, enforcement weakened. By 1978, most states had repealed or stopped enforcing them. Today's 24/7 Christmas shopping would have been unthinkable for 1960s families. Stockings with oranges and nuts. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Christmas stockings always had one thing in the toe: an orange and a mixture of in-shell nuts. This was a tradition from the Great Depression era, but persisted strongly even in affluent families. The orange symbolized exotic luxury because fresh fruit was rare in winter. The nuts were always in-shell: walnuts, Brazil nuts, pecans, and hazelnuts, requiring a nutcracker. The orange was always a navel type, individually wrapped in tissue paper. Children looked forward to these items and felt cheated if they were missing. The nuts filled mesh bags, which cost about 79 cents in 1968. Traditional stockings also contained ribbon candy, chocolate coins, and candy canes. Small toys like jackballs, marbles, yo-yos filled the remaining space. However, by the mid-1970s, the year-round availability of fruit made oranges commonplace. Shelled nuts became more popular. Most importantly, video games and expensive small gifts changed stocking expectations. The simple joy of discovering an orange and nuts on Christmas morning completely vanished. Christmas plays in every school. In the early 1970s, U.S. public schools almost universally held elaborate Christmas plays without causing any controversy. This was a universal reality. Every child participated regardless of religion. These plays were not brief performances. They consumed the entire December curriculum with weeks of strenuous rehearsals. The content of the plays was explicit and religious. The performances openly included nativity scenes, angels, the three kings, and religious songs. This occurred before the Epper versus Arkansas Supreme Court case in 1968 began to raise concerns about religious content in schools. Parents, especially mothers, spent months sewing costumes. Bed sheets were cleverly transformed into shepherd robes, and tinfoil was placed over cardboard crowns for the wise men. Schools competed fiercely to have the most complicated and elaborate backdrops and costumes. Teachers even spent personal money on decorations and set design. The evening performance was a major event, drawing large audiences, filling auditoriums with extended families. Local newspapers even seriously reviewed these elementary school plays. The Christmas play greatly influenced the children's social hierarchy. Who played Mary or Joseph was extremely important and valued. Notably, Jewish, Muslim, and atheist families rarely publicly opposed their children's participation in these overtly religious performances. Some schools even performed the same traditional play annually. Live Christmas trees in classrooms. Every classroom had its own separate real Christmas tree. These pine trees were brought in after Thanksgiving and became the center of festive joy, decorated by the students themselves. This was a competitive craft activity, with teachers often paying out of their own pockets to buy the trees at a cost of about $5. Classes competed for the title of the best decorated tree, with the principal serving as the judge of the contest. Students spent time during art class creating handmade decorations. They made popcorn chains, paper snowflakes, and handmade paper chains. The tree required daily care, so watering became a rotating student responsibility. Even cleaning up the dropped pine needles on the floor became a form of punishment. Some teachers were ambitious enough to flock the trees themselves right in the classroom, despite the massive mess this created. The rich smell of fresh pine in a classroom filled with twinkling lights was a characteristic sensory memory of December. Behind this romance lay a huge danger. The risk of fire was enormous due to the trees drying out over time, flammable paper decorations, and frequently overloaded electrical outlets. A few tragic school fires occurred in the early 1970s, forcing safety regulations to change. By 1975, artificial trees began replacing real ones, and eventually insurance concerns, along with awareness of religious diversity and allergy issues, eliminated trees, even artificial ones, from public schools. The universal experience of decorating the classroom Christmas tree together has completely disappeared from the public education system. Company-sponsored children's parties. Large companies in the 1960s frequently hosted extravagant Christmas parties specifically for employees' children. These were grand Saturday afternoon events aimed at building company loyalty and community. For example, Ford's 1967 party in Detroit served 15,000 children at a cost of $75,000. The parties included entertainment such as magicians, puppet shows, and cartoons. Every child received an age-appropriate gift, carefully selected by the Human Resources Department. Real department store Santas listened to wishes, while photographers captured the moments. Companies rented convention centers or decorated factory floors. Lunch included hot dogs, hamburgers, ice cream, and unlimited soda. There were even activities like mini pony rides or fair games. However, by 1975, liability insurance made these events too expensive. Furthermore, workforce diversity and issues concerning the attendance of working mothers made specifically Christmas-themed parties problematic. Cigarettes as Christmas gifts. It is hard to imagine today, but cigarettes were a premium, sophisticated, and valued Christmas gift throughout the 1960s and early 1970s. Cartons of cigarettes were wrapped in festive paper and placed under the Christmas tree. Brands like Philip Morris created special gift sets that included lighters and ashtrays. A carton of cigarettes cost about $2.40 in 1965, making them an affordable but substantial gift. Advertisements frequently showed Santa Claus smoking, with slogans encouraging, "Give the gift of pleasure." Even non-smokers gave cigarettes as thoughtful gifts. Teenagers bought cigarettes for their parents without any opposition. The Surgeon General's report in 1964 warning about the dangers of smoking had very little impact on this gift-giving habit. Television advertisements continued to promote cigarettes as thoughtful gifts until 1970. Christmas morning. Trash burning. Immediately after opening presents, 1960s families had a practical and spectacular ritual: immediately burning the wrapping paper, boxes, and ribbons in the fireplace or a backyard incinerator. This tradition aimed to instantly clean up the huge accumulation of paper. Burning the wrapping paper created brilliant flames from the colored paper, which was entertaining for children. The smell of burning wrapping paper became a characteristic sensory memory of Christmas morning. Some communities had traditional burning hours at noon, when smoke rose from every chimney. Rural families used incinerator drums, creating towering flames. Fire departments reported a spike in calls on Christmas morning due to uncontrolled wrapping paper fires. However, by 1970, air quality regulations began to restrict trash burning. The emergence of recycling awareness made burning trash seem wasteful. Modern toys had more complex packaging, and environmental consciousness eliminated this tradition around 1978. That dramatic ritual was replaced by careful trash sorting. Although these traditions have vanished, the memories and warm family values they embodied remain. Thank you for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe. Back to yesterday to help us preserve the stories of the past.